Hi, welcome back to the fourth and concluding day of the four-part 38th National Pesticide Forum, Cultivating Healthy Communities. I'm Jay Feldman, Executive Director of Beyond Pesticides. And again, on behalf of the staff and board of directors of Beyond Pesticides, our co-convener, the Institute for Exposomic Research at the Icahn School of Medicine at Mount Sinai, and our generous supporters, we're so glad to have you participating at this conference. Today's forum program reflects key elements of change that are essential to successful efforts worldwide to eliminate societal dependence on fossil fuel-based pesticides and fertilizers. I like to say that the forum is not a static event disconnected from our critical ongoing efforts. It's a checking in and updating. For me, our forum is energizing. The passion of those who attend is inspiring. We are honing our skills. We are improving our ability to affect change. We are widening our reach. We are elevating our stories. We are meeting the urgency of the moment. We are working on systemic change as we recognize the gravity of the present day existential threats. The forum reminds us of how much we don't but should know before releasing known toxic chemicals into our land, air, water, and food supply. For me, the forum is inspiring because of the work that you are doing throughout the country and the world to fix the problems that have led to the environmental and public health crises that we face. We know the solutions are within our grasp, and today's program and last week's highlight the solutions that we have available but must make greater use of. With this program, we also recognize the absolutely critical nature of grassroots engagement with the policymaking process at all levels of government, in schools, workplaces, in our homes, and through our purchasing decisions. With the COVID pandemic, the nation and the world have been through a tragedy of unthinkable dimensions, taking a devastating death and disease toll on families and communities and forcing a cascade of destruction to our educational system, economy, and social networks. If we didn't understand it before, we now have experienced the interrelationship of these systems, and we can see that the work for change that goes on in these different arenas are interconnected and interwoven. A sustainable world can only be achieved with foundational change to our social, economic, and environmental norms. So advocates working in these different arenas must and are joining together and support each other at the local, state, and national level. What else has the COVID pandemic taught us? Here's what's been reinforced for me. Different population groups have disproportionate vulnerabilities, from children to older people, people of different socioeconomic status and race. Essential workers, from hospital personnel to grocery store workers, farm workers to landscapers, suffer elevated risk factors due to exposure patterns, creating disproportionate rates of disease. Those with pre-existing conditions or comorbidities face higher risks. And a lack of complete scientific knowledge requires a precautionary approach or standard. The COVID crisis has given us a vivid appreciation of these things, and yet our policies across the board, pick a federal or state agency, do not recognize this. The COVID pandemic brought to national attention essential understandings that must be applied to policy and practices. If you think of our society as a superorganism, all these functions in society operate as a whole. And to the extent that we disrupt the functioning of these interrelated parts, we do so at our peril. It is in this spirit that we must evaluate the use of toxic pesticides, which are developed to purposefully disrupt biological systems. As a part of ecosystems, from human to microbial life in the soil, or mayfly nymphs, the keystone species at the bottom of the aquatic food web, we coexist and depend on each other. So we turn to the grassroots. As advocates, we take on what appears to some to be insurmountable goals to ensure that those in decision-making positions take positions based on the pressure that we can mount to meet the challenges of the day. Our job is to change what is politically feasible. Of course, we join with allies in positions of power, like US Representative Joe Neguse, who will be speaking later today. We know that vested interests bring different analyses, their own analyses to support their positions. And we know that there is truly independent science, and then there is industry science, and that either they can be asking the wrong questions or intentionally misleading the public to protect financial interests. Let's face it, if we live in a world of facts and alternative facts, things can get confusing. In this context, the grassroots voice determines the outcome. We cannot simply tweak restrictions on pesticides with known hazards and broad uncertainties about the effects of mixtures, synergistic effects, cumulative risks associated with location, occupation, and demographics, given that we have the alternatives to eliminate those hazards and solve the looming environmental threats. So grassroots activism is absolutely critical to advancing foundational change. We must demand that all policy governing health, welfare, and environmental protection embrace a holistic and equitable approach to systemic change. Yes, we need to advance individual chemical bans, but only in the context of a shift to eliminate all toxic pesticides that disrupt life. And we can now build on the foundation of organic systems as we continue to learn and to incentivize the best methods and management strategies possible. As Dr. Martin Luther King said in his speech, "Where do we go from here?" to the annual Southern Christian Leadership Conference convention in 1967, quote, "We must walk on in the days ahead with an audacious faith in the future." So let's keep up the great work. And the concluding day at the forum, continue to connect with other participants and use the chat feature to ask questions and make comments during the workshops. We'll join together at the end of the day for a robust discussion with you. This forum has over 600 people and organizations registered from 15 countries. We appreciate you being here and look forward to our continuing work together. Now I turn it over to the chair of the Beyond Pesticides Board, Dr. Routt Reigart. Thank you.
Good afternoon and welcome. I'm Routt Reigart, chairman of the board at Beyond Pesticides and a professor emeritus of pediatrics at the Medical University of South Carolina. We're excited to have you here for our fourth and final session of this pesticide forum. I'd like to sort of emphasize again how exciting it is to have this virtual forum. Last year, we had an outstanding forum arranged in Boulder, Colorado, which we had to cancel because of COVID. And going into this year, we realized that this having to cancel last year actually presented us a unique opportunity to develop this very exciting virtual forum. In the past, we've had good attendance at our on-site in-person fora, but we, in this virtual forum, we've been able to attract many more people and therefore reach many more people, so that even though it's a bit technically difficult to do a virtual forum, we think that it's a good thing, and we hope that you're enjoying it. For those of you that this is your first session, welcome. For those of you that are coming back, welcome back. Today is really very exciting. We're going to talk a lot about challenging the status quo, using science to affect the law, and looking a lot at both regulatory activities or not legal, more legislative activities, as well as what we can expect of corporations that are non-governmental. So I think you'll find this very exciting. In a way, it should be quite uplifting because we're going to spend some time looking at how understanding the science, understanding the importance of sound ecological systems, understanding the importance of removing pesticides from our environment, we now have the opportunity to enact change that allows us to get the pesticides out of our environment, improve non-pesticide systems in order to have happy, healthy, for me, children and adults, not to mention happy bees and other pollinators. All of the elements of our society and ecology that have in the past been adversely affected by pesticides. Remembering that pesticides are meant to kill. That's why they're called sides. And there is no, to my awareness, there's no pesticide that doesn't have effects that are not related to what it was designed for. And so it's very important that we get them out and improve our ecology. Our last speaker today is very excited. It's Dr. Joe Neguse, who is in that House of Representatives from Colorado. And Mr. Neguse is been very active in the US Congress in promoting activities that decrease and hopefully ultimately eliminate the use of pesticides from our environment. You'll also hear in a few minutes, actually in no minutes, from Sarah Evans, who's representing our co-convener, the Icahn School of Medicine at Mount Sinai, and I'll pass it on to her to introduce us. Thank you all for being here. It's been an exciting conference. This is the last day, and we hope you've enjoyed it.
Good afternoon. On behalf of the Mount Sinai Institute for Exposomics Research, I'd like to welcome you to the final session of the Cultivating Healthy Communities Forum. Throughout the series, you've heard from leaders in the field of environmental health science, pediatrics, soil science, organic land management and agriculture, and climate science. You've heard convincing evidence that synthetic chemicals are damaging our health and our planet in ways that you may not have even imagined. Today, you'll hear more about the application of cutting-edge science that is revolutionizing the ways in which we study pesticide health impacts. For example, we know that trace levels of chemicals and the interaction between mixtures of chemicals and pesticide formulations can impact health. But unfortunately, this is not how pesticides are assessed for safety by regulatory agencies. The forum will wrap up on a positive note, and today you'll hear more about the path forward to a pesticide-free future. You'll hear about initiatives to improve infrastructure that supports organic, sustainable farming and makes these practices more accessible to local farmers. A pesticide-free future is only attainable when we work together. So I'm really excited to hear from a panel of activists from across the country who've worked tirelessly to successfully reduce pesticide exposures in their communities. Their inspiring stories of success show us what can happen when communities come together to demand safer, healthy environments for all. There's much to be hopeful about. Just this past year, we've seen action at the local level lead to pesticide restrictions and bans in major cities, including New York and Philadelphia. Today, you'll hear from some of the advocates who worked for years to make this happen, including a New York City kindergarten teacher whose young students deserve much of the credit for this incredible achievement in New York. You'll also hear from my Mount Sinai colleague, Luz Guel, about how scientists and academic institutions can form meaningful, respectful partnerships with communities to support the creation of healthier environments. And lastly, I hope you'll join us at the end of the day to hear from Colorado Congressman Joe Neguse, who listened to scientists and communities and introduced a House resolution calling for a national biodiversity strategy, acknowledging the damage that human-driven activities are doing to our planet and our health. Representative Neguse is proof that one of the most important steps that you can take towards a toxic-free future and the cultivation of healthy communities is to exercise your right to vote. So again, I'd like to thank you all for joining us throughout this series, and I hope that it has left you inspired and armed with the tools that you need to advocate for pesticide-free communities.